My name is Emily Richardson. I work with the Leavenworth Fisheries Complex, and today I'm going to be reading you Swimmer, written by Shelley Gill and illustrated by Shannon Cartwright. Let's get started. In the fading glow of the midnight sun, Katya watched the net, waiting for the telltale jerking motion. This was her 6th year at fish camp, and just as she knew leaves fell from the trees each autumn, she knew the salmon would soon return from the sea. She knew because her grandmother told her stories of the great Chinook, king of all salmon. She knew because she remembered the prayer her grandmother had taught her. "Oh, swimmers, thank you for coming to us," Katya whispered, cutting the long shape of the salmon in the sand with an ivory knife. "Swimmer, we honor you." It was an ancient prayer of thanks to the fish that had fed her people for thousands of years. Katya imagined she was a sleek salmon gliding through the icy waters of the Bering Sea, swimming in deep places surrounded by shadow creatures, rising to dance beneath the northern lights. But time is a circle, the girl knew. One day a gleaming silver, the Chinooks soon grow old, their skin turning red, the splash from their leaping a fitful death song. When they returned from the sea, only one task remained. They must lay their eggs in the river. It all happened in the river. Birth and death, beginning and end. In the beginning, the bright red leaves from the blueberry bushes spilled across the tundra. Above the tree line, the ground was bright with snow. At dawn, a skim of ice clung to the rocks that dotted Caribou Creek. Just beneath the twisted limb of an old birch, deep in the river gravel, lay thousands of orange eggs, an underwater nursery. As the days grew shorter and colder, the world around the nest grew white and silent. Winter deepened, and the eggs began to change color, first to deep orange, then pale apricot. A day came in February when a shadow moved inside one of the eggs. Before long, they began to hatch. Swimmer was born. Not much bigger than a budding willow leaf, Swimmer was nourished from the pouch of food she carried on her belly. When the spring ice began to creak and groan, the small salmon wriggled from the safety of her nest. Now she began to hunt, and, no longer hidden, she became the hunted. Above the frozen ice, otters scampered and moose foraged. Beneath the ice, Swimmer fought for her life. Grayling darted through the shallows, feasting on baby salmon. As the ice melted, predators from the sky joined the hunt. Swimmer hid in the river's dark bends, and as the days grew longer, she sank deeper into a shadow world, eating insect larvae, hiding in the rocks. As the brown spring gave way to summer green, Swimmer grew. She would spend 2 years in freshwater before leaving on a great journey to the salty water of the sea. Her skin grew silver scales as she began her move to deep water, hunting by night, hiding by day. She was surrounded by thousands of other salmon, all of them feeding, many of them becoming food. Swimmer was lucky. She survived, drifting down the creek until she reached the big water, the great muddy Yukon, her highway to the sea. Each night, Swimmer and the other salmon sought safety along the murky edges of the muddy Yukon. Their watery world was swift and thick with chunks of spring ice heaving above them. Pike, sheafish, and burbot gobbled them up. Thousands died, but Swimmer survived. Summer was near, and soon fishing nets would reach into the river, set to catch the big salmon returning from the sea. Beyond the wide river was the delta, and here Swimmer lingered. She sensed a change in the motion of the water, a first taste of salt in the tide. She fed on rich clouds of tiny marine creatures and shrimp that floated in the shallow waters. She grew bigger and stronger, and then one day she was there, in the boundless sea that had called to her since birth. Cruising at sea speed, leaping through the dark wall of waves, Swimmer pushed further into the blue-black distance, away from the scent of her home river. She stored knowledge of currents and eddies in each nerve that passed from her gills to her tail. As the sea moved through the Earth's magnetic field, tiny electrical surges helped her navigate. From 100 creeks through a dozen rivers, thousands of other salmon joined together in schools. As they explored the deep waters, months passed and the seasons rolled into years. But even for big fish in large schools, danger lurked. Beneath the schools, the warm-blooded porpoises hovered, invisible until they shot upwards, flipping at the last moment to snatch at the bellies of the salmon and cut them in two. The dark shapes that darted to the surface to breathe blocked the bright light of the sun as swimmer dove, fear driving her toward the shadows, but in her flight, she flashed her silver sides to an even greater enemy. The orca was following the harbor porpoise when he smelled the salmon. 15 seasons past his birth, the orca was nearly 20 feet long. In one motion, he rolled after Swimmer. Swimmer fled, pressing for the safety of a rocky ledge. The whale followed, slicing through the sea, his white teeth ready to snap. Down, down, surging down. Swimmer could feel the whale's body behind her. Closer and closer, the huge jaws opened. The tug of the wake pulled toward the rows of deadly teeth. Then, darkness. Swimmer pressed her body against crusty rocks, breath ragged, blood pumping. The killer whale circled, its nose bumping against her hiding place. And then the orca was gone, and, once again, Swimmer had survived. Swimmer followed mid-ocean currents in a counterclockwise migration, up the coast of Alaska to the edge of the Bering Sea, then west into the deep waters of the Pacific. By the time she was 5 years old, Swimmer had traveled more than 10,000 miles, dodging whales and sharks and seals and the nets of the fishing fleets. Eat and avoid being eaten. That was Swimmer's life. Then, in her 5th year, the ancient instincts that had driven her to leave the river of her birth and seek the sea told her it was time to go home. She began her homeward migration in the spring. The geese were also winging north, honking in high-flying formation as they headed to their nesting grounds. Across the northern hemisphere, animals shook off winter's spell and began to move. A caribou stopped to drink as she circled back to her Arctic calving grounds. Whales left the warm southern waters, joined by ringed seals, sea lions, and walrus. All of them moved in their own rhythm, to find food, to mate, to survive. For Swimmer and the other salmon, the journey back to the home creek was filled with danger. All along the Yukon, fishermen stretched their nylon nets, hoping to catch salmon to eat and sell. As Swimmer thrust past, she could hear the pounding echo of the unlucky fish, their bodies banging against the hulls of boats. Further upriver, people fished with gill nets and dip nets, fish wheels and poles. Grizzly bears fished with mouth and claws, while the wolverine and eagle fed on leftovers. Everyone depended on the returning fish to make them fat for winter. Swimmer paid little attention to those who hunted her. She had only one purpose: to lay her eggs on a gravel bed near the birch where she was born. Familiar smells guided Swimmer to Caribou Creek. Beside her, behind her, swam more fish. The deep water turned shallow, and sometimes sharp rocks cut her, but Swimmer hardly noticed. Downriver at Fish Camp, women split their catch at the belly with sharp knives, then stripped the salmon to hang on alder poles in the smokehouse. Katya, now 11 years old, paused from her chores at the river's edge. She flicked her story knife across the mud with the same motion Swimmer used to flick her tail, digging her nest upstream in the gravel. A male salmon hovered nearby. As Swimmer dropped her precious eggs, he covered them with a cloud of milky sperm. With powerful sweeps of her tail, Swimmer buried the nest. Then she pushed up the river, her energy waning, her life slipping away. Soon the circle would close. She built another nest, and another. If one was destroyed, another might survive. What kind of magic helped these mighty fish find their way back to Caribou Creek? Katya wondered as she paused along the bank. But soon the girl was drawn up the trail by the smells of her camp. The fry bread, the drying fish, the wood smoke. She was at the beginning of her own journey and had much to learn. Like Swimmer, Katya would face danger and sadness, struggling against the current, at times feeling battered and bruised. Yet she would always remember the brave beauty of the salmon, flinging their silver bodies in the sunlight, flexing, jumping in the ancient fierce dance that brought them back to the place where the circle closed. As Katya dreamed of adventures to come, Swimmer's adventure ended. Beneath the icy waters of Caribou Creek, the body that held her mighty spirit lay next to the roots of the old birch, crumbling bit by bit over the winter months, adding rich food to the water for the next generation of salmon to eat. Near Swimmer's tail, one bright orange egg tumbled along a sandy patch of bottom. Where the circle ended, the circle began. The end. Thanks for tuning in to listen to Swimmer by Shelley Gill, illustrated by Shannon Cartwright. My name is Emily Richardson with the Leavenworth Fisheries Complex, and I'll see you next time. Bye!